The Cabin in the Woods, a haunting discovery. I've always loved escaping to nature. The thought of a solo hiking trip in a remote forest was thrilling. It was late fall when I decided to take a break from the city and immerse myself in the serenity of the wilderness. My plan was simple: follow the well-marked trails and spend a few days enjoying the quiet. After a couple of days of hiking, I found myself eager for a bit of adventure. One afternoon, I spotted an overgrown path veering off from the main trail. It was barely noticeable, hidden beneath layers of fallen leaves and tangled branches. Something about it called to me, and against my better judgment, I decided to explore. The path led deeper into the forest, and after about an hour of winding through dense trees, I stumbled upon a clearing. In the center stood a small, weather-beaten cabin. It looked abandoned, the kind of place you'd see in old horror movies. The wooden walls were splintered, the roof sagging, and the windows were boarded up. An old rocking chair creaked on the porch as if someone had just left it moments before. My curiosity piqued. I approached cautiously, the crunch of leaves underfoot breaking the silence. The cabin exuded a sense of foreboding, but I pushed aside my unease, attributing it to the cabin's dilapidated state. I noticed strange symbols carved into the wood, symbols that seemed almost ritualistic. They were crude, but the patterns were unsettling, and a shiver ran down my spine. I walked around the cabin, noting its state of decay. When I reached the back, I saw that the door was slightly ajar. Despite my better judgment, I decided to take a look inside. I pushed the door open with a creak that seemed to echo through the clearing. The interior was a time capsule from decades past. Dust motes danced in the slivers of sunlight that managed to pierce through the boarded windows. Old furniture, covered in white sheets, stood in ghostly silence. Cobwebs hung from the corners like delicate lace. I took a few steps in, my footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. My attention was drawn to the wall opposite the door. There, hanging in a tarnished frame, was an old photograph. It depicted a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children. They were dressed in early 20th century clothing, and they stood in front of the very cabin I was in. The family's expressions were unnervingly serene, but their eyes, something was off about their eyes. They seemed to hold a sorrowful depth, an unspoken story. I pulled out my phone and took a few pictures of the photograph and the cabin. I didn't want to stay too long, as the place gave me a growing sense of unease. I decided to head back, my heart pounding as I retraced my steps. The forest seemed different now, darker and more oppressive. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig underfoot, made me jump. When I reached my car, I felt a wave of relief. The familiar sight of the vehicle brought back a sense of normalcy. I drove back to the town where I was staying, trying to shake off the unsettling feeling that had clung to me since leaving the cabin. That night, I reviewed the photos I had taken. Everything seemed normal until I got to the pictures of the family portrait. In the photograph, their eyes were no longer visible. Where their eyes should have been were dark, empty voids. I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I tried to convince myself it was just a glitch or an artifact of the photo. But the unease remained, gnawing at me. The next day, I decided to put it out of my mind and enjoy the rest of my trip. But the memory of the cabin lingered. When I returned to the city, I tried to forget about it. However, a few weeks later, a news story caught my attention. It was about a local family who had gone missing without a trace. The description matched the family in the photograph perfectly. The news report was brief, with no further updates. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a connection between the cabin, the photograph, and the missing family. I reached out to the authorities, but they had no record of any recent disappearances in that area, and my claims were dismissed as the ramblings of an overactive imagination. As time passed, I tried to ignore the lingering dread that accompanied my memories of the cabin. But every now and then, when I was alone in the dark or when the wind howled outside, I felt as though those empty eyes were watching me, waiting for me to return to that desolate clearing. The cabin remains in my thoughts, a dark spot in an otherwise peaceful memory. I've never gone back to that forest, and I never will. Sometimes, when I look at the photos, I can't help but feel that something sinister is lurking just beyond the edge of the frame, a shadow that has followed me home. And though I've tried to convince myself it was just a trick of light or a faulty camera, deep down, I know that some places are best left undisturbed. The cabin in the woods holds a mystery I'm better off not unraveling, and I hope that whatever is waiting there remains hidden from the world.